Entire libraries of knowledge were once hidden not in vaults, but in plain speech. When empires fell and invaders came, the greatest treasures were not gold or jewels, but truths protected by ingenious languages. This video uncovers 25 forgotten tongues, each a masterfully designed cipher that shielded sacred texts, scientific breakthroughs, and cultural identities from annihilation. You will learn the full story of how these linguistic shields were built and why their disappearance cost humanity priceless wisdom. How did Persian alchemists encode their formulas into love poetry? What secrets does an undeciphered script from a remote Pacific island still protect today? By the end, you will see how the simple act of speaking could become the ultimate defense against erasure. What do you believe is the most valuable truth a civilization could choose to protect? A language built to guard secrets is far more than a forgotten dialect. It is a living fortress, its very architecture designed to confuse and exclude the uninvited. Think of it not as a means of communication for all, but as a locked chest for which only a select few hold the key. These linguistic shields often operated as a cant or an argot, specialized jargons used by closed groups. Medieval stonemasons, for instance, might have used coded terms to discuss the delicate proportions of a cathedral's arch, ensuring their hard-won engineering knowledge stayed within their guild. In a similar way, tinkers roaming from village to village could use a private vocabulary to talk about prices and materials without their customers understanding. On a grander, more sacred scale, some civilizations developed entire liturgical languages reserved for priesthoods. These tongues protected religious rituals and cosmological truths from what was seen as profanation, ensuring that profound mysteries remained pure and powerful in the hands of the initiated. The complexity was the entire point. Unusual grammar, borrowed words from ancient or foreign tongues, and even deliberately altered pronunciations all served to build walls around precious knowledge. This principle of intentional complexity finds one of its most brilliant expressions in our first entry, a language forged in the cultural fires of the British Isles. Moving through the Irish countryside, a community perfected the art of silent communication. Shelta, the secret tongue of the travelers, was born from necessity. For generations, these nomadic families lived on the margins of settled society, where sharing private plans in the open could mean the difference between a successful trade and utter ruin. Their language became a mobile sanctuary, a space for free speech in a world that often viewed them with distrust. At its heart, Shelta is a masterclass in linguistic disguise. It takes the familiar foundation of Irish Gaelic and deliberately scrambles it. Words are often reversed or their sounds altered in a consistent, systematic way, creating a code that was impenetrable to the very Gaelic speakers among whom the travelers lived and worked. The Irish word for woman, bean, becomes binka in Shelta. The word for priest, sagat, transforms into gratza. This was not a random collection of slang, but a fully formed language with its own internal logic, designed specifically to confuse outsiders. A conversation about a business deal or a personal matter could happen in plain hearing, yet remain utterly private. This linguistic shield protected their economic dealings, their social plans, and their cultural identity, allowing a vulnerable community to maintain its cohesion and independence for centuries. It stands as a powerful testament to how a language can be forged not just for communication, but for self-preservation. While Shelta created privacy in the open air, the crowded docks of the medieval Mediterranean required a different kind of linguistic shield. In ports from Alexandria to Venice, a cacophony of Arabic, Greek, Italian, and Turkish filled the air as merchants haggled over silks and spices. To navigate this chaos without giving away their commercial edge, they forged a common tongue known as Lingua Franca, or Sabia. This was not a language of deep poetry or sacred ritual, but a pragmatic tool for trade. It was a pidgin, a simplified hybrid built primarily on Romance languages like Italian and Occitan, yet generously sprinkled with words from Arabic, Greek, and Turkish. A Genoese sailor could agree on a price for a shipment of pepper with an Egyptian trader, sealing the deal in Sabia. The language allowed them to communicate essential information about routes, prices, and cargo, while the finer points of their negotiation, the real strategic value, remained locked within their native tongues. This was the corporate espionage protection of its day, a cipher that protected not profound truths, but the immensely practical truths of commerce that formed the economic lifelines of empires. It was a language born of mutual need, yet designed for mutual caution. From these pragmatic exchanges on the docks, our journey now ascends to the silent, celestial language that mapped the heavens themselves. Far from the bustling ports, in quiet rooms filled with the scent of sulfur and heated metals, another form of coded communication thrived. Persian alchemists pursued a goal that was as much spiritual as it was scientific, seeking not just to transmute lead into gold, but to perfect the human soul. Their greatest discoveries, however, were dangerously tangible. A manuscript detailing how to produce potent acids or purify metals could be seen as a threat by rulers or religious authorities, inviting confiscation or worse. To protect their work, these scholars invented Zaban-e Dar, a secret language of allegory. On the surface, their texts read like profound mystical poetry, filled with symbolic weddings, tragic deaths, and glorious resurrections. But every beautiful image was a precise scientific instruction in disguise. When an alchemist wrote of the marriage of the king and queen, he was describing a specific chemical reaction between gold and silver. The phrase "the green lion devouring the sun" was not a mythical tale, but a coded reference to a powerful acid, perhaps aqua regia, capable of dissolving even noble gold. This linguistic alchemy transformed their laboratory manuals into works of art, ensuring that any outsider who stumbled upon their writings would see only spiritual allegory. The true formulas for transformative chemical processes remained hidden in plain sight, accessible only to those initiates who possessed the key to the metaphor. This brilliant fusion of science and poetry allowed dangerous truths to be preserved as beautiful lies, a tradition that would soon inspire artists an ocean away. A song of adoration could be a shield for sedition in the courts of medieval Occitania. Here, the troubadours who perfected the art of courtly love also mastered a dangerous linguistic craft known as Trobar Clus, the enclosed style. Their compositions were not straightforward ballads. They were intricate puzzles set to music, deliberately woven with complex syntax, archaic words, and bewildering metaphors that baffled the uninitiated listener. On the surface, a poet might sing of his unrequited love for a distant, beautiful lady, but for those with the key, that lady was not a person at all. She could be a metaphor for a philosophical concept, or the entire song might be a thinly veiled political attack on a local lord or a critique of the powerful church. This poetic encryption allowed artists to voice heretical beliefs and biting social commentary from the very heart of the courts they criticized. The melodic beauty of the performance was the perfect disguise, disarming suspicion while the true, subversive message was passed safely to those in the know. In an age of rigid orthodoxy, the sweetest songs often carried the most dangerous truths, protected by the sheer brilliance of their construction. This tradition of hiding meaning in artistry found a parallel not in sound but in sight within the quiet scriptoriums where monks toiled over parchment. A speech by Cicero himself could be captured word for word, not in flowing Latin script, but in a cascade of efficient, cryptic symbols. This was the power of Tironian Notes, an elaborate shorthand system developed by Marcus Tullius Tiro, the great orator's own secretary. Imagine the scene in the Roman Senate, where Tiro's stylus would fly across his wax tablet, not writing letters, but drawing thousands of specialized marks that stood for whole words, common phrases, and syllables. This was not merely a tool for speed. It was a sophisticated linguistic technology that turned the spoken word into a coded script in real time. Centuries after Rome's fall, this system found a surprising new home within the quiet walls of medieval monasteries. Here, monks meticulously copied sacred texts, but they also used Tiro's ancient shorthand for their own private purposes. In the margins of a beautifully illuminated Bible, a monk might use Tironian Notes to record a personal theological insight, a critique of his abbot's leadership, or a piece of local gossip. To any other brother or visiting nobleman, these marks were mere scribbles, meaningless decorations. But to an initiated few, the margins whispered with clandestine conversations and dangerous ideas. An entire administrative record detailing the monastery's wealth or a fragment of pagan philosophy considered too controversial to preserve in plain text could be hidden in a ledger written in this arcane script. It was a linguistic firewall built directly into the parchment, protecting sensitive knowledge not with locks but with a veil of supreme efficiency. The very speed that made it useful for transcription also made it a perfect cipher for secrecy. This principle, where protection is born from streamlined communication, would be pushed to its absolute extreme in the sprawling, complex legal system of a civilization that mastered bureaucracy as an art form. The collapse of a Bronze Age superpower forged an unbreakable linguistic lock. In the highlands of Anatolia, the Hittite Empire commanded a network of vassal states and rivaled Egypt itself, its power chronicled on countless clay tablets. These were not inscribed in a common tongue, but in the empire's own unique language, a linguistic isolate that stood completely apart from the Semitic and Indo-European languages of their neighbors and trading partners. They used the widespread cuneiform script, the wedge-shaped writing system of the ancient Near East, but the language it conveyed was Hittite alone. This was their diplomatic and administrative code. Within their vast royal archives at Hattusa, meticulous treaties, detailed laws, and profound ritual texts were all committed to clay in this singular tongue. Then, around 1200 BC, their civilization shattered. Invaders swept in, their cities were abandoned, and the knowledge of how to read their language vanished from the earth. For over 3,000 years, the Hittites were little more than a name in the Bible, their truth rendered silent, their entire worldview, their sophisticated legal concepts that influenced surrounding cultures, and the precise details of their complex religious pantheon were protected not by design, but by the ultimate obscurity born from total collapse. The fall of their empire became the perfect, impenetrable vault, sealing their secrets in a code that no one alive could crack until its dramatic decipherment in the 20th century. This demonstrates a profound irony that sometimes a civilization's greatest protection is its own disappearance. From a language preserved by its empire's ruin, we now turn to a tongue that was actively woven into the daily life and spiritual identity of an entire people. High atop the plateaus of Ethiopia, the kingdom of Aksum wielded a linguistic key to its sovereignty. As one of the earliest empires to embrace Christianity, its people developed a profound division of language. The vibrant, living tongue of Amharic filled the markets and homes, while the ancient language of Jez was elevated into a sacred fortress. It became the exclusive property of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a living relic used for scripture, complex theology, and the meticulous royal chronicles that documented the lineage of its kings. This was not an accident but a deliberate strategy. By locking their most profound spiritual and historical truths inside Jez, a language only the clergy and scholarly elite could decipher, the Ethiopians built a moat around their identity. Any foreign power or influence that arrived on their shores would find the heart of their culture inaccessible. The Bible, the very word of their God, was safe from alteration. Their unique interpretations of doctrine, which set their form of Christianity apart from both Rome and Constantinople, were protected from challenge. This linguistic wall allowed a stream of faith to flow uninterrupted for over a millennium, its purity defended not by armies, but by the impenetrable vocabulary and grammar of a sanctified tongue. Where Jez preserved the celestial, our next language was forged for terrestrial power, a secret code for the battlefield. While empires built codes for diplomacy and trade, a different kind of script was being woven in the quiet courtyards of Jongyong County. For centuries, in a society where women were barred from the formal education that granted men power and status, they engineered their own linguistic escape. This was Nüshu, a script created by women for women, a secret current of communication flowing entirely outside the patriarchal mainstream. Denied access to the complex standard Chinese characters, they developed a graceful, phonetic script that could be quickly learned and privately shared from mother to daughter and between sworn sisters. They inscribed it onto delicate paper, folded it into fans, and embroidered it onto cloth. These were not dry administrative records, but heartfelt letters, poetic songs of sorrow known as third-day missives, and stories that gave voice to their inner lives. In these flowing, stylized characters, they could confess the loneliness of an arranged marriage, share the joy of a newborn child, or lament the burden of societal expectations. Nüshu was more than a writing system, it was a sanctuary. It protected the intimate truths of their daily existence, their personal histories, and their emotional worlds, forming a silent, resilient sisterhood that transcended the walls built around them. This script was a testament to the human spirit's unyielding need to be heard. From a language of personal emancipation and profound emotional truth, our focus now shifts to a cipher designed for the highest levels of statecraft and the stark necessities of war. A single intercepted letter could topple a government in Renaissance Italy. In the glittering, treacherous courts of Venice, Florence, and Milan, where alliances shifted like sunlight on the canals, the most powerful currency was not gold but information. Ambassadors and spies became masters of a new art form, the diplomatic cipher. These were not full languages, but highly sophisticated linguistic systems built for absolute secrecy. They transformed sensitive words into baffling sequences of numbers or esoteric symbols, all based on codebooks that were updated with paranoid frequency. A message about a potential betrayal by a French ally would not read as plain text. Instead, it would appear as a column of seemingly random numbers, each one corresponding to a specific word or syllable in a key that only the sender and a trusted recipient possessed. The famous Venetian cipher was so effective that even today, historians painstakingly decode these messages to uncover the realpolitik that shaped an era, revealing the secret negotiations and clandestine treaties that official histories often omit. The security of these systems was a matter of life and death for a state. A broken cipher did not just mean a leaked secret, it could lead to a surprise invasion, financial collapse, or the execution of a valued agent. Protecting the volatile truths of political power required a constantly evolving linguistic fortress. This relentless focus on preserving political identity through coded communication finds a powerful parallel in a language that shielded an entire spiritual identity from being absorbed by a dominant culture. The sound of the sea and the rhythm of the mine were once accompanied by a tongue as rugged as the Cornish coastline itself. For centuries, this Celtic language was the living heart of a people determined to maintain their identity against the relentless tide of English influence. It was not the language of court or high scholarship, but the practical tongue of fishermen coordinating their catches along treacherous shores and miners deep underground, discussing the day's yield of tin. In the village pub or the marketplace, it was the sound of a community speaking freely about local affairs, a constant, audible reminder that they were not merely English subjects, but a people with their own history and their own land. This daily use was a form of quiet defiance, a linguistic bulwark against cultural absorption. But during moments of open rebellion, such as the Prayer Book Rebellion of 1549, Cornish transformed into something far more potent, a language of conspiracy. When Cornish men and women rose up against the imposition of an English-language prayer book, their native tongue became a cipher for planning resistance, allowing them to coordinate under the very noses of the Crown's officials. The slow, tragic decline of Cornish as a daily spoken language was a long rearguard action, a retreat into smaller and more isolated pockets until its last traditional speakers were gone. Yet its story did not end there. In a powerful modern revival, Cornish has been brought back from the brink through meticulous scholarship and grassroots passion. This resurrection is not about nostalgia, but about reclaiming a key that unlocks a unique Celtic heritage. It protects the original meanings of ancient place names, preserving the folklore and the entire world you intrinsically linked to the land and sea. The language itself became the ultimate guardian of Cornish truth, a truth now being spoken aloud once more. This struggle to preserve a cultural identity through cryptic communication finds a startling echo in the baffling symbols of a book that has resisted all understanding for centuries. An unreadable book holds the ultimate secret. The Voynich Manuscript is a 240-page mystery, bound in vellum and filled from edge to edge with a script that belongs to no known language on earth. Its curling, alien characters flow alongside illustrations of plants that have never grown, of women bathing in interconnected green pools, and of celestial charts mapping unknown constellations. Since its rediscovery in the early 20th century, this book has withstood every assault from the world's greatest cryptographers, from intelligence agencies who broke wartime codes to supercomputers running endless algorithms. They have all failed. The manuscript's protective language, if it is a language at all, has proven to be an impervious fortress. Was this volume a pharmacopoeia of lost herbal knowledge, its true formulas hidden behind a complex cipher? Could it be the sole surviving record of a vanished culture's understanding of the cosmos, rendered unintelligible by their extinction? Or is its greatest truth the hoax itself, a brilliant and frustrating performance of meaning without any substance? The power of this linguistic shield lies in its absolute ambiguity. We cannot even be certain what kind of truth it was built to protect, whether profound or trivial. Its very existence is a humbling reminder that some doors, once closed by time and design, may remain locked forever. From this impenetrable enigma, we pivot to a language created with the opposite goal, not to obscure, but to unite humanity under a single, hopeful banner. The ultimate linguistic shield might be one built not for secrecy, but for perfect clarity. In the late 19th century, a Polish ophthalmologist named L. Zamenhof grew up in a city divided by language and ethnic strife. He watched how the very words people spoke could build walls of suspicion and conflict, and he dreamed of a different kind of tool. He created Esperanto, a language designed from the ground up to be easy to learn and politically neutral. Its vocabulary was drawn from common European roots, its grammar was breathtakingly simple, and its entire purpose was to protect a profound truth, the truth that humanity could communicate without the historical baggage of nationalism and prejudice. Esperanto was a linguistic peace treaty, a constructed language designed to foster mutual understanding and protect the ideal of global harmony from the distortions and deceptions of rival native tongues. But this idealistic vision was part of a much older tradition. Centuries earlier, thinkers like John Wilkins in England had attempted to build a philosophical language. His grand project aimed to create a vocabulary where every word logically mirrored the essence of the thing it described. In such a system, the very structure of a word for stone would reveal its properties, its composition, its place in the universe. This was an attempt to protect truth from ambiguity itself, to create a perfect, transparent medium for human thought where misunderstanding and deliberate deception would become linguistically impossible. These constructed languages were fortresses built not to conceal knowledge, but to protect it from the noise and chaos of imperfect communication. They represent a hopeful, if elusive, branch of our story, where language itself is engineered as a sanctuary for reason. This pursuit of a perfect, sacred clarity finds its ultimate expression in a tongue that was never meant to be spoken by the common man. The very grammar of Sanskrit was a fortress wall. In ancient India, this language was revered as Deva Vani, the speech of the gods themselves, and its structure was engineered to be as perfect and eternal as the cosmic truths it was built to convey. The sacred Vedic hymns were not merely written down, they were sonic blueprints, preserved with such extraordinary phonetic precision that a single mispronounced syllable was believed to render a ritual powerless. This was a language where sound and meaning were inseparably fused. The great grammarian Panini codified its rules into a system of almost mathematical elegance and immense complexity. A feat of linguistic engineering so complete that it has been compared to a computer programming language for human speech. This formidable difficulty was the core of its protective design. To master Sanskrit required years, often decades, of devoted study under the guidance of a guru. This long apprenticeship was a filter, ensuring that the profound philosophical revelations of the Upanishads and the intricate cosmological knowledge embedded in the Vedas did not fall into unprepared hands. A casual reader could not simply pick up a text and misinterpret its subtle doctrines. The language itself demanded a deep, disciplined commitment, guaranteeing that the transmission of knowledge about everything from the nature of consciousness to advanced mathematical concepts remained pure and uncorrupted for thousands of years. It was a system where the very complexity of the medium became the ultimate guardian of the message. This protective principle, where labyrinthine language shields profound meaning, would be echoed in the dry, dense legalism of an empire that perfected bureaucracy as a form of power. The sacred fire had to be kept burning, its rituals spoken in words that belonged to the fire itself. For the followers of Zoroaster, the prophet who reshaped Persian spirituality, their most ancient truths were encoded in the melodic verses of the Gathas, composed in a tongue called Avestan. This was not the language of the bustling Achaemenid court or the marketplace, but a specialized, ancient Eastern Iranian dialect that became the exclusive vessel for divine revelation. As Zoroastrianism flourished as a state religion, Avestan was deliberately frozen in time, fossilized as a perfect liturgical language, immune to the slow drift of everyday speech. This act of preservation became their ultimate shield when the world around them transformed. With the spread of Islam across Persia, Zoroastrian communities faced immense pressure to assimilate. A group known as the Parsis made a dramatic exodus, carrying their sacred fire to the shores of India. In their new home, surrounded by an entirely different culture and religion, they clung to Avestan with fierce devotion. The language was no longer a mother tongue anyone spoke at home, but its very sounds were a sanctuary. Priests meticulously memorized and recited the complex hymns, passing the precise phonetics from one generation to the next, often with the congregation understanding the meaning only through explanations, not through direct comprehension. The power was in the performance itself. The recitation of the sacred words, the mantras, was seen as a potent force that maintained cosmic order. By protecting the sonic integrity of Avestan, they were protecting the essence of their faith, its dualistic cosmology of light and darkness, and its emphasis on free will and ethical choice. The language became a living relic, a spiritual fortress whose walls were built from rhythm and sound, ensuring that the core of their identity could not be diluted or erased by the overwhelming cultural pressures they faced for centuries. This use of a specialized language to guard a sacred craft finds a powerful parallel in the secular world, where entire professions built their own linguistic walls to protect the secrets of their trade. A whispered word in a crowded market could signal a heist or a hanging. While scholars perfected their ciphers, the back alleys and shadowed inns of Europe buzzed with a different kind of linguistic armor, thieves' cant. This was not a full language with its own grammar, but a sprawling, ever-changing lexicon of slang, a secret code for the dispossessed. Beggars, pickpockets, and highwaymen used this underground lingo, sometimes called peddler's French, to conduct their business in plain hearing. To an outsider, a conversation between two vagabonds might sound like nonsensical chatter, but when one mentioned that a Harmon was watching the cove with the queer, he was delivering a vital warning: a lawman is watching the man with the purse. This coded communication protected their entire shadow economy. It allowed them to identify allies in a strange town, coordinate the timing of a robbery, or signal that the constables were on the move. The very structure of their society, its unwritten rules and survival strategies, depended on this linguistic veil. Its notoriety even reached the curious upper classes, with a 16th-century pamphlet publishing a kind of dictionary for this criminal jargon, turning the language of the streets into a perverse form of popular entertainment. Yet for those who lived by it, thieves' cant was a shield for the brutal truths of a life lived on the margins, a testament to how secrecy becomes the ultimate currency for the hunted. This rough, practical code of the underworld stands in stark contrast to our next language, a cipher of such immense complexity that it was designed to protect the universe itself. A single sheet of parchment was a treasure, and every word had to earn its place. Beyond the well-known system of Tironian Notes, medieval monks engineered a whole family of secret scripts to guard their thoughts. Some were simple letter substitution ciphers, where a B might always stand for an A, easily broken by a determined reader. But others were far more ingenious, using a menagerie of unique symbols to represent entire common words, sacred names, or even complex theological concepts. On the surface, a manuscript page might look like a standard Latin text, but scattered throughout were these cryptic marks, a second layer of meaning hidden in plain sight. Why go to such trouble? The practical reason was the immense cost and effort of producing parchment, and these abbreviations saved precious space, yet the true motive often ran deeper. A monk could use his own personal cipher to annotate a Bible with a radical interpretation that might draw the ire of his abbot. He could record a potent recipe for a medicinal tincture or a particularly vibrant ink, formulas that constituted valuable intellectual property for the monastery. In letters sent along the network of monastic houses, These ciphers allowed for private communication about internal disputes or sensitive theological debates, shielded from the eyes of lay brothers or visiting nobles. This was not mere note-taking, it was a culture of scholarly secrecy, protecting both the operational secrets of the scriptorium and the private spiritual explorations of devout men. This long-standing tradition of encoding divine mysteries within sacred texts finds one of its most profound expressions not in a Christian monastery, but in the mystical heart of Judaism. Each Hebrew letter pulsed with a hidden numerical life. For the Kabbalists, the sacred texts were not just stories or laws, they were intricate, divinely engineered puzzles. This mystical tradition, known as Kabbalah, transformed the Hebrew language into a multi-layered code, where every word and every letter held a secret dimension of meaning. The primary tool for this decryption was gematria, the practice of calculating the numerical value of words. Since every Hebrew letter is also a number, any two words sharing the same numerical sum were believed to share a profound, hidden connection. A Kabbalist might spend years contemplating why the numerical value of the word for love, ahava, equals 13, and why the word for one, echad, also equals 13. This was not a coincidence, but a divine clue pointing toward a cosmic unity, that true love leads to oneness. This created a meta-language, a system of interpretation operating entirely beneath the surface of the scripture. The straightforward narrative of the Torah was merely the first outer shell. The real, esoteric truths about the structure of the divine realms, the process of creation, and the journey of the human soul were locked within these numerical patterns and letter permutations. This intricate system acted as a perfect spiritual safeguard. A casual reader would find only the surface story, but a deeply initiated scholar, one who had undergone years of rigorous preparation and spiritual discipline, could unlock transformative and potentially dangerous knowledge about the very fabric of reality. It protected the most volatile mystical concepts from being misunderstood or misused, ensuring that only those with the proper reverence and intellectual training could access the power within the words. This profound belief that language itself is a cosmic code to be deciphered stands in stark contrast to the practical, earthly need for a language that could ensure a people's sheer physical survival. A wooden tablet covered in intricate, staring faces and strange, fluid glyphs holds the entire history of a people who can no longer read it. This is the Rongo-Rongo script of Easter Island, one of history's most heartbreaking linguistic shields. Carved onto driftwood and ceremonial objects, these glyphs were not mere decoration. They were the archives of the Rapa Nui civilization, recording everything from royal genealogies to their epic creation myths and the sophisticated knowledge that allowed them to erect their famous Moai statues. The script was a living library guarded by a special class of priests and chanters. Then, in the 1860s, Peruvian slave raiders descended upon the island, capturing or killing nearly half the population. Among those lost were the last learned elders, the only people who held the key to the Rongo-Rongo code. In a single, brutal blow, the chain of transmission was shattered. The script did not fade away, it was severed. Today, 24 surviving tablets remain, covered in a beautiful, baffling text that stares back at us, mute. The very tragedy that shattered the Rapa Nui culture transformed their script into its ultimate guardian. The truths it protects about their relationship to the land, the sea, and their ancestors are now permanently safe from misinterpretation, from outside influence, from any form of alteration. The language achieved its final, perfect state of protection through absolute silence, ensuring the soul of its people could never be fully captured or explained away. This profound loss makes the survival of our next language, rescued from a similar precipice, all the more remarkable. The final echo of the pharaohs did not fade in hieroglyphs, but in the prayers of a new faith. As the ancient Egyptian language evolved over millennia, its last spoken form was Coptic, a tongue that represents a profound cultural fusion. It abandoned the complex hieroglyphic and demotic scripts of its ancestors, adopting instead the familiar Greek alphabet. But it was not a surrender, it was a clever adaptation. Scribes added several new letters borrowed directly from demotic Egyptian, ensuring the unique sounds of the Nile could still be perfectly captured. This newly configured script became the vessel for a spiritual revolution, the language of Egyptian Christianity. The Bible was translated into Coptic, and a rich body of theological literature, from the sermons of Saint Anthony to the Gnostic Gospels, flourished in its letters. Then the political landscape shifted irrevocably. Following the Islamic conquests of the 7th century, Arabic swept across Egypt, becoming the language of government, trade, and daily life. In the face of this overwhelming change, Coptic did not die. It performed a strategic retreat, much like Jez in Ethiopia, finding an unassailable sanctuary within the liturgy of the Coptic Orthodox Church. For centuries, the solemn Mass in every Coptic church has been celebrated in this ancient tongue. While the congregations may speak Arabic in the streets, the words of their most sacred rituals have remained unchanged, a direct sonic link to their pre-Islamic and ultimately pharaonic past. This liturgical life support system protected more than just Christian doctrine. It preserved the very phonetics of ancient Egypt. Modern scholars studying Coptic can hear, for the first time in 2,000 years, how the builders of the pyramids actually spoke. The language became a frozen record, safeguarding a unique window into the dramatic transition from the ancient to the medieval world, proving that a faith can become the ultimate guardian of a civilization's final words. This role of the Church as a linguistic fortress finds a powerful parallel in the rugged highlands of the Caucasus Mountains. A new alphabet was carved not to obscure truth, but to make it universal. When the Byzantine emperor sent the brothers Cyril and Methodius on a mission to the Slavic peoples, they faced a profound challenge. How could they translate the complex theology of Christianity for a culture with no written language of its own? Their answer was an act of linguistic creation, not conquest. They devised the Glagolitic alphabet, a script of beautiful, intricate curves, tailored specifically to capture the unique sounds of the Slavic tongue. This language, now known as Old Church Slavonic, was then used to translate the Bible and the entire Byzantine liturgy. This was a revolutionary gift. It meant that a Bulgarian farmer or a Moravian prince could hear the word of God in the familiar cadences of their own speech, rather than the imposing, foreign tones of Greek or Latin. The brothers had built a bridge, allowing a new faith to enter Slavic lands without erasing the cultural identity already there. This newly forged sacred language quickly became a powerful unifying force. From the Balkans to the growing power of Kievan Rus, diverse and often rival Slavic tribes now shared a common liturgical tongue. Old Church Slavonic provided a stable, unchanging foundation for their Orthodox faith, a linguistic anchor that held fast through centuries of political upheaval and invasion. It protected their developing cultural identities by giving them a sacred space that was intrinsically their own, a spiritual home built from the very sounds of their native soil. This brilliant strategy of building a protective shield from a vernacular language stands in stark contrast to the fate of a tongue that needed no such construction, a language so perfectly adapted to its environment that it became a natural fortress. The Pyrenees Mountains themselves seem to speak through the Basque people. Their language, Euskara, stands utterly alone in Europe, a living relic from a time before the great Indo-European migrations reshaped the continent. With no known relatives, its origins are a profound mystery. buried so deep in prehistory that even the Romans who conquered the region could not fully absorb it. This ancient uniqueness became its greatest strength. For centuries, waves of empires and centralized states attempted to assimilate the fiercely independent Basques, but they consistently stumbled against the wall of Euskara. During the repressive Franco regime in Spain, when the public use of Basque was brutally suppressed, the language retreated into the safety of homes and clandestine gatherings. It became a whispered code of resistance, protecting more than just communication. Within its unique structure lay an entire non-Indo-European worldview, a different way of categorizing reality that separated insiders from outsiders. It safeguarded the traditional legal codes known as fors, which guaranteed local autonomy and a cultural identity intrinsically tied to the rugged landscape. The language was the fortress, and its sheer, impenetrable age made it a shield that simply could not be broken. Its survival is a testament to the power of radical difference, proving that a tongue too old to be erased can protect a people's truth for millennia. This power of isolation is a key factor in linguistic survival, as seen in our next example from the north. A simple notch in a standing stone could whisper a name, claim a territory, or warn of danger. This was the power of Ogham, the notched script of the Celts. Across early medieval Ireland and Britain, this alphabet transformed the edges of stone pillars and wooden stakes into a discrete medium for communication. The system was elegantly simple, a central stem line acting as a spine from which groups of 1 to 5 short lines branched off, either diagonally, perpendicularly, or crossing the stem. Each unique grouping represented a letter in their alphabet. While many surviving inscriptions are stark memorials, reading like a name and a father's name carved for eternity, the very form of Ogham suggests a more clandestine purpose. Its inscriptions were not meant to be displayed on a flat, open surface. They were carved along the sharp edge or corner of a stone, a placement that made the writing difficult to spot unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. In a landscape of shifting tribal loyalties and the looming threat of invasion, a simple pattern of notches could serve as a perfect cipher. A specific marking on a boundary stone could indicate a safe route for travelers allied with a local chieftain. A sequence carved into a tree at a crossroads might hold a short, urgent message for a passing scout, completely invisible to any foreign soldier or rival group. It was a tactile, localized form of intelligence, protecting the flow of local knowledge and strategic communications through the ultimate simplicity of its design. The truth it guarded was not a grand cosmic mystery, but the immediate, vital truth of survival and community in a volatile world. This physical, grounded script stands in stark contrast to a language that achieved its protective power not through stone, but through the immense, unwritten complexity of the human voice. A library could walk, talk, and die with its last librarian. For the Druids of ancient Gaul and Britain, the most profound knowledge was never entrusted to parchment or stone. Classical observers like Julius Caesar recorded with astonishment that these learned priests and judges considered it a sacrilege to write down their sacred lore. Their entire intellectual universe, a vast curriculum encompassing the motions of stars, the complexities of natural philosophy, intricate legal precedents, and thousands of lines of sacred poetry, existed solely within human memory. This was not a primitive choice, but a sophisticated security protocol. Committing nothing to writing meant their knowledge could not be seized in a raid, burned by an invading army, or profaned by uninitiated eyes. The truth was a living thing, passed directly from teacher to student in a chain of trust that could take 20 years to complete. This immense mental discipline created a knowledge system that was perfectly mobile, moving safely through forests and across rivers, and entirely secure, as invisible as a thought until the moment it was spoken aloud. When the Roman war machine finally crushed the Druidic order, this strategy achieved its final, tragic form of protection. The immense library of Celtic wisdom did not burn, it simply fell silent. The last bearers of those epic poems and astronomical observations took them to their graves, choosing oblivion over surrender. The spoken word, so powerful in life, became the ultimate vault in death. This reliance on elite guardianship finds a fascinating parallel in a language that protected not through secrecy, but through sheer, refined exclusivity. The language of the Sumerians refused to die with its last native speaker. For 2,000 years after it fell silent in the streets and markets, Sumerian lived on as the sacred tongue of Mesopotamian scholarship, a classical language revered by the Akkadian-speaking Babylonians and Assyrians who came to power. Imagine a world where every lawyer, doctor, and priest had to be fluent in a dialect no one had spoken at home for centuries, simply to perform their duties. This was the reality in the great library of Nineveh and the scribble schools across the region. Cuneiform tablets containing everything from the Epic of Gilgamesh to precise mathematical theorems and complex legal precedents were all written in this ancient foundational tongue. To access this accumulated wisdom, a budding scribe had to undergo years of rigorous training, mastering vast lists of vocabulary and intricate grammatical rules. This immense effort built a formidable linguistic barrier. A farmer or a soldier, or even a nobleman who had not undergone this specific education, could not simply pick up a tablet and read the law or understand a medical prescription. The knowledge of the ages was locked away, protected by the sheer difficulty of a dead language. This system gave the scribble class an almost priestly authority. They became the sole gatekeepers of civilization's operating manual, controlling the flow of legal, scientific, and religious truth. By preserving Sumerian in its pure, unchanging form, they ensured that the core innovations of the world's first urban civilization, from the concept of time measured in 60 units to the principles of written law, were transmitted across millennia without corruption or dilution. The language itself became a timeless vault, and the scribes held the only keys. The final door remains locked, its key lost to the waves. On the sun-drenched island of Crete, the Minoans built Europe's first advanced civilization, a society of breathtaking artistry and sprawling, labyrinthine palaces. Their administrative records, their economic dealings, and their deepest religious beliefs were all meticulously recorded on clay tablets in a script we call Linear A. Centuries later, their mainland successors, the Mycenaean Greeks, would adapt this very script to write their own language, creating the syllabic system known as Linear B. That script was cracked, giving us a voice for the warlords of Mycenae, but the original Linear A continues to guard its secrets with absolute silence. This is the ultimate linguistic shield, one that protects not just information, but an entire civilization's soul. The vibrant frescoes of bull leapers and elegant goddesses show us a people of immense sophistication, yet their own words are denied to us. Were these vast palace complexes like Knossos primarily administrative centers, or were they the beating hearts of a theocratic society led by powerful priestesses? The economic records we can almost understand, the lists of commodities and quantities, hint at a complex, wide-ranging trade network. But the language itself, the names of their deities, their poetry, their laws, all of it is trapped behind an unbreakable code. Every attempt to force it open, to apply the logic used on Linear B, has failed. The Minoan language encoded in these signs is unrelated to any known tongue, a complete isolate. Its continued mystery means the most profound truths of this foundational European culture are permanently safe. The script does not just hide answers, it protects the very questions we have not yet thought to ask, ensuring that the vibrant, powerful truth of the Minoans remains a beautiful, unreachable enigma, forever just beyond our grasp. These forgotten languages form a global testament to human resilience. They tell us that when a culture's back is against the wall, its most powerful weapon is not always a sword but a sentence. The creation of a secret tongue is an act of profound defiance, a declaration that the spirit of a people cannot be so easily conquered. This was a war waged with words, a brilliant strategy to encode the very essence of a civilization into sounds and symbols that could slip past armies and outlive the empires that sought to dominate them. Yet this brilliant defense carries a deep and painful irony. A language built to be an impenetrable fortress can become a perfect prison. The very obscurity that protected a sacred ritual or a scientific formula from outsiders could eventually lead to that knowledge being lost to everyone, even the descendants of its creators. When the last initiated priest or the final speaking elder passes away without a successor, an entire library of human experience vanishes in a single breath. The unique worldview embedded in its grammar, the subtle knowledge of plants encoded in its poetry, the entire intellectual and spiritual heritage of a people, all of it falls into an eternal silence. These stories are far more than historical curiosities. They are a stark cautionary tale. They remind us that linguistic diversity is not a trivial matter. It is the very ecosystem of human thought. Each lost language is a universe of understanding extinguished, a permanent dimming of the collective light of our species. The ultimate legacy of these lost tongues is an urgent question for us today, a challenge to listen for the whispers that remain before they, too, are swallowed by the silence. From the coded speech of Irish travelers to the undeciphered scripts of Minoan Crete, we have journeyed through a hidden history of linguistic fortresses. These 25 forgotten languages were never failures of communication. They were masterpieces of selective silence, meticulously designed to protect ancient truths from invaders, oppressors, and the slow erosion of time. Each one stands as a powerful reminder that language is far more than a simple tool for conversation. It is a living repository of an entire culture, a quiet weapon of resistance, and a sanctuary for the very soul of a people. As we reflect on these lost and fading voices, we can begin to appreciate the incredible diversity of human thought and the ingenious lengths to which civilizations will go to safeguard their unique heritage. What other profound truths remain locked away in languages we have yet to understand, or have simply forgotten how to hear? The quest to recover these echoes of our shared past continues. If this exploration into the hidden power of words resonated with you, we would love to hear your thoughts. Which of these linguistic fortresses fascinated you the most? Share your reflections in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten corners of history.